Hello everybody, it is Loco Pojo. Welcome to Eternal Brews. Dark Frontier has been out for about 12-16 hours by now, and we've been playing a lot of different interesting decks. I thought we'd start our first Eternal Brew of the season with a slightly cheaper deck that we can build using legendaries from the old set and one of the new rares, Evenhanded Golem, a 2/2 summon that says if you have no odd cost cards in your deck, draw 2 cards. Now, as promised, there are no other cards in this set that support even or odd based cards, and I think that's going to stay that way for a while, but Even-Handed Golem is pretty strong, and there are some interesting even costed decks that you can build. We've seen some interesting Katra stuff come out, so there will probably be some brews on that soonish, or at least the lists will be floating around. But this was the first one that I built, basically one of the first decks that we built when we got started, and I had a blast with it, and it did super well while we were playing with it. So we're going to show it off and talk about what's going on with this. This is an aggro deck using Helpful Doorbot and Accelerated Impact, a combo that we've played with before a little bit, but is always good in sort of Praxis-y time-based setups where you have a lot of interesting cards that can actually get you card advantage and lots of stats, but tend to be like a little bit more on the even side or have higher health values because of the way that time cards work. So cards like Teacher of Humility, Marisen's Disciple, cards like Devotee of the Sands, which gives us this 3 health unit. Lots of things that actually give us a ton of health, but don't actually give us a lot of attack, or more attack than health, while still being pretty aggressive and pretty offensive. Combine that with basically a very, very heavy pile of 2-drops, a couple of 0-drops, Sand Warrior and Doorbot, and cards like Xenan Obelisk, Clock of Stolen Hours, and of course Accelerated Impact itself. We get a big old pile of stats very, very quickly, we blow out our opponent with it very, very quickly, and we try to win as many games on aggro as we can in a very short period of time. This deck's really fun, so let's talk about all the things that make it work. First things first, we have several different draw engines. We have Even-Handed Golem, we have Impatient Pyromage, and we have Teacher of Humility, which of course has play disciplinary weights on the enemy player. Then each player draws a card. Marisen's Disciple was a card that I was considering for the list. I think actually another option is Living Example. It's a pretty good one to play with, but you can do sort of whatever you want with this. We basically use all of these cards to draw additional cards every time that we play our 2-drops out, so that we are always playing as much of our power as possible and thus achieving maximum tempo for our overall amount of power spent. We just get to spend as much power as we can, and then we use that power to do some pretty effective stuff. Cards like Impatient Pyromage also allow us to reduce the cost of 2-cost cards by 1, thus allowing us to play on turn 3 2 units in a turn, which something that is not as easy to do. But our turn 3 will also sometimes be occupied by playing our 3rd time source and playing a Sand Warrior, which as a turn 3 play tends to be a pretty good one. It's a 3/3 card. You can play as many of them as you have in your hand on turn 3, and you can do really, really ridiculous things with it. The only other cards in the deck that have more attack than health are Cinder Sprites. 2 of these basically function as a very expensive sort of damage dealing option that also synergizes well with Clock of Stolen Hours and Xenan Obelisk. We're never really planning on activating the clock, but Obelisk will sometimes get up to 8 based off of our extra power off of Devotee of the Sands. Doorbot, of course, activates with Obelisk, allowing us to attack with multiple units. We get to basically generate lots of stats for blockers if we need to defend ourselves against other aggro decks and be sort of as defensive as we are offensive. This deck can turn into the control deck against an aggro list if we need to, and because all of our drops are 2-drops, we're pretty okay with that, and we'll usually be able to sort of get ourselves into a position where we start winning again and then start swinging back onto our opponents. Removal, we keep a lot of it. We use Piercing Shot, Purify, and Conflagrate. Obviously, we cannot use Torch or any sort of 1-cost card, so we are just trying to remove as many threats as possible, deal damage straight to face, and then go in for the kill. Everything else in this deck is pretty straightforward. We actually run a lot of different banners, insignias, seats, and crests. Praxis Insignia is invaluable in this deck for getting Teacher of Humility on time and for getting a Sand Warrior on time. And if we get those things together at the right times, the deck tends to work out pretty well. As far as hands go, you should generally be looking for hands that have Even-Handed Golem, Impatient Pyromage, and Teacher of Humility. Those 3 cards really sort of make up the backbone of the deck. They draw you enough extra cards that you tend to feel pretty happy about your overall results. And with cards like Piercing Shot and Conflagrate and Purify, we're able to clear a lot of things and get the damage in and get the Teacher in, which slows our opponent down even further as we rush in with a pile of damage. So let's show off a couple of games. This should be pretty straightforward, but hopefully we can explain our thought process a little bit more as we get into some games. So see you there. Alright, so opening hand number 1, we got Rat Boy, and this is a really interesting one. I think I'm pretty down with it. We're going to go for the Crest of Impulse into possibly Sand Warrior. We might Praxis Insignia and Impatient Pyromage. That seems like a reasonable 2-drop here. We'll go ahead and keep it. Obviously the 3 Sand Warriors are great, and I'd like to be playing those as well as playing as much aggression as possible. We'll lose a card on Impatient Pyromage because we don't have the Onslaught, but that's okay, and if we find anything else to play, we'll do that instead. Okay, Crest of Impulse number 1. Evenhanded Golem's perfect. That's actually exactly the card we want to play this turn. And then we can play Praxis Insignia into... yeah, oh man, this is going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so Praxis Insignia allows us to play Evenhanded, and then we play a Time Sigil into Impatient Pyromage, and hopefully we get some sweet things. But yeah, we got our aggression. This is going to be absurd. Displaced Xenan gets a Scout. Cool, cool, cool. So I will go play a time here, play Evenhanded Golem. Drew an Amaran Armadillo, which is definitely not a bad deal. I could actually throw that down now if I wanted to, although I think I might be after Impatient Pyromage. Zulta Loyalist gets the shift, that's not a big deal. Obviously the attack here is a little bit rough, but everything else feels fine. We're going to go ahead and attack in. I'm going to play a Praxis banner. Impatient Pyromage draws a card.
Fuel for the fire.
Got a helpful Doorbot, not bad. Sand Warrior, Sand Warrior, Sand Warrior, Doorbot. Seems like a good hand. I think that should be a good start. Amaran Armadillo is up next if we can. And yeah, everything's looking pretty solid here. So we've got quite a bit of damage pushing. We're okay with just being very, very aggressive here. We're not after any like particular setup. Zulta Loyalist shifted out very early, so we do have to deal with that, but like the overall consequences shouldn't be too much of an issue. Okay, Accelerated Impact is right on time, and that should be more than enough to just shove in here. I think we're going to go straight to it. Here's all the damage. Basically everything here will be doing 3 or 4. So swing on in. And yeah, that's pretty good. That's a good 8, 16, 19, 22 points of damage on turn 4, I think? Turn 4. So feeling pretty good. Our opponent's decently well prepared for us. So they got some amount of extra stuff going on, but Praxis Insignia gets us a Amaran Armadillo. Amaran Armadillo gets us at least 1 extra point, and now we just have to push in for a little bit more if we can. I don't have quite as many aggressive units as I would like, but as long as my opponent is attacking at least somewhat, or like doesn't play too many good things, I think we should be okay at pushing through. Crest of Impulse here's got some potential. Piercing Shot or Conflagrate would be excellent to have. We've got potential options. Okay. So Kimmy has to attack to generate value. Reweave has got options. I'm actually not sure what that merchant's going to get us. There's a Purify, so... oh! And the Reweave actually shifts the Aurelian merchant, so that's going to be a Purify there. Attack in with everything, and yeah. I think our opponent might have forgotten that Reweave shifts the unit, so... but we got our value, so doesn't feel bad at all. Good stuff. Alright, round 2 versus Honeypot. We got some options here. I think we're probably not going to go with that because 1 power is not good enough. Here is a little bit more viable. We have Devotee of the Sands, that can attack in and play Impatient Pyromage. I'd like to get a little more power here, and I'd like to get, of course, even-handed golems, but I don't feel bad about having this much removal for like an aggressive style, so we should be okay here. Guru Insignia, okay, so I'd love to go first, but that's okay. We'll make it work. Helpful Doorbot, I'm going to pass on that. I don't have Accelerated Impact, and I'm looking for power. Strategize here. So our opponent's playing something slow to start. Praxis Insignia is going to get us nice and set up and get us a little closer to Sand Warrior. I'd rather play Devotee as a unit than as a shifted unit, and see what we can do with it. Strategize is fine. Impatient Pyromage is pretty good here. There's options, certainly. Say second Insignia. I'm playing into Hailstorm if I go too crazy with Marisen's Disciple. But I think overall I'm pretty happy to at least attack here. If we want to do Marisen's Disciple, we'll get a lot of good stuff, but we might get Hailstormed. I think it's worth the attempt. If they have Hailstorm, so be it. We'll have to figure something else out, but we're going to do the damage we can.
Let your spirit rise.
Oh, good. It's a Sheltering Rider. Okay, so now we get to play our Granite Waystone here. We're just gonna, I think, Conflagrate on that. We can Purify it as well, but I think we'll probably want to Impatient Pyromage too, since we've got the Obelisk coming. So, swing with all of these. Impatient Pyromage plays.
Fuel for the fire.
Oh, Accelerated Impact is unfortunately not on time, so we'll just play a Granite. It's the one card we don't want to get off Impatient Pyromage, but we still got Xenan Obelisk and Purify, so there's no real worry there. Throne Warden gets a bunch of armor. Definitely a good card here, but not necessarily going to blow us out, so we'll do the Obelisk here. I like attacking with both of these 4/4s. I can attack with everything if I want to. There's 10 points of damage here. Or I can just trade. I think I'm more interested in trading and using the second Obelisk to set up for better, since the second Obelisk obviously gets us into a blowout stage. Winchest Merchant, that's likely to be grabbing some sort of partial, so we really want to throw down those Obelisks now. Vision of Austerity. Oh, well that locks us out. Okay, fair enough. In that case, it's Accelerated Impact. Go ahead and swing in with everything, but first things first, we're going to Purify this 2/2 so there's less blockers. That looks like enough damage. I think we'll be okay. Three block there, 3 block there. Lethal, so works for me. Math is for blockers. It's good when the blockers don't do the math. Alright, here we are up against Man Shark. I got Cinder, Sprite, Sand Warrior, and some Obelisks. I love the Obelisk, but everything else with this hand is a little bit not that great. We're more interested in Evenhanded Golem or Devotee, and there we go. So this will be something we can play with. I'd say probably Devotee is a decent lead-in. Evenhanded Golem has good play too, so it's a little bit tricky to decide which is better. Generally, drawing the cards is really useful, especially if you have the time available, so we might just go for it. Yeah, we got a Evenhanded and an Evenhanded. Let's lead Devotee to start. We can even play it shifted so that we can guarantee ourselves 2 Evenhandeds next turn, and then set up this for like a big Accelerated Impact later on. So Evenhanded here. Draws us 2. Amaran Armadillo is great. I think I'm just going to lead with that. Play a Helpful Doorbot, and end my turn. Next turn we play Evenhanded again, then we just start going nuts. Annihilate here is a little bit rough, but not the end of the world. Shadow Sigil for Man Shark gets us into potentially Iron territory, which is not my favorite thing. But Suffocate, that part's not as huge a deal. Okay. Oh, I wanted to play the Armadillo first. Whoops. Okay, we'll play our power out. We've got a very, very big swing coming up. It's probably just going to be Accelerated Impact into whatever.
Now it's my turn.
That's a little rough. I guess we'll go ahead and sacrifice here, since all of our other attackers will have 4 damage. So, Accelerated Impact. Attack with everything, get a bunch of damage in, do it again next turn. A total of 16 to start. Would have gotten a little bit more off of that Doorbot if we'd had the Endurance, so 1 extra point. Hopefully that doesn't end up making a difference.
my turn.
Obviously, Vara can't be allowed to live. Let's go ahead and sack a Doorbot there. Impact here is still pretty close to lethal. Like, we are going to force some pretty bad blocks.
Back to dust.
Got a 4/4 there.
You're a sad bunch. I'll finish this.
Teacher's neither here nor there. We don't really care about that. Conflagrate gets us exactly what we want. Like Conflagrate and Piercing Shot. I almost get there. Okay. Options-wise, we don't have a lot. The best one is probably to double Conflagrate at some point. I can't Conflagrate and kill Vara and attack for 4, 1, and 1. At which point our opponent has to block... Can't block the 4/4 with both units. Has to block at least 1 damage from each side. So that seems like the best option. Yeah, no, that block doesn't work because they died. Math is for blockers. When the blockers don't do the math. We might have been able to pull something extra there, but I think that was definitely the way to go. So, seems good stuff. Alright, so that's the basics of our even-handed aggro, and yeah, I think we're going to be pretty happy with this list overall. There's still some tweaking to be done. I'm really wanting to get Living Example in here, and I think there's plenty of different places that we can do that. It might even be an alternative to Amaran Armadillo, which, as far as like the endurance setup goes, is really interesting. We could play both it and Living Example together and get some interesting options. So I think I might end up cutting like 1 to 2 of the Devotees and just going for the Living Examples instead, and then just, that's the basic place that we might land the deck at the end of it. So thank you guys so much for watching. We will be back with another Eternal Brew hopefully tomorrow. I am out tomorrow, so I won't be streaming on Friday, but we should be streaming Saturday evening, and hopefully some of Sunday as well. So see you guys then. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be trying to get videos up off of Dark Frontier basically all of this week, as much as possible. So stay tuned, feel free to sub, and as always, thank you all for watching. Bye. Have a good one.